Hey, 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 welcome to day number 10 of 21 days of prayer for your business. If you've got your book, go grab it. If you don't have your book or you don't have a book period, that is okay. Today I'm actually going to be reading a lot out of the book itself, so you kind of get a little freebie here, a little peek into what the book is all about. Also in the description we always leave a link for where you can purchase the book, as well as a free downloadable for the intro in chapter 1, so make sure you go check that out. Today's topic, if you watched the video before this one, it was all about embracing excellence, and we said don't let that confuse you with perfectionism, which is what we're talking about today. And it's so funny. I remember when I wrote this book, I wrote it down at a beach house in Florida. And when we got to the editing phase, when I got finished with it, our business manager and my best friend came down to the beach. And we sat in a room and we put the words up on a big screen on the TV, and I read it out, and I faced the TV and I read it, and they sat behind me so I couldn't get distracted with their facial expressions or anything, and they would stop me and go, oh, well, maybe you could word it this way, or maybe this wasn't really making sense. And that's kind of how we did the first round of edits. And when it got to this chapter, I remember I literally could not read it out loud. Even just saying that, like I get a little choked up. Like I couldn't get through the paragraph. I am gonna get through it, reading it to you guys. But you know, when something that you struggle with, I think I was like being really real and raw through this, and when you struggle with something, it hits you hard. And this topic, I would have to say, is my number one out of all things I deal with. This is what I deal with.
Yeah, I think it actually hits pretty close to home for both of us, but in slightly different ways. So it'll be interesting to sort of talk that out.
Well, what ways? I think I know, but like, what ways would you say it's different for me and you?
Well, I tend to overanalyze and not get started, whereas you'll just start usually. And then I have a critical mindset. Like I see things that are broken, and I don't see the 99% of the thing that's beautiful. I only see the one light bulb that's out, like just all the time. So we were walking out of the gym the day before yesterday. I was like, they got a lot of light bulbs out here. It's like, I just see the things that are not right, and I miss the good part usually.
I think another thing where you and I are different in this situation is I tend to continue it with a loop in my head, and I can't turn it off. And you may feel that way, but in an hour or 30 minutes later, even 10 minutes later, maybe even 10 seconds later.
10 seconds usually.
10 seconds, you're fine. And 10 hours later, I'm still thinking on it. And it's exhausting. So
I do sometimes think, God, I wish I would have blah, blah, blah. And that I'll think about that for 5 or 10 minutes, but I don't think about it for like 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me with this topic. As you know, I wrote the book like 6 or 7 years ago, and so I've gotten tons of feedback over the 6 or 7 years. And I can tell you the 2 chapters that I get feedback on the most are Finding Freedom from Your Past and Perfectionism Weighs You Down. I've had more people message me that said they would have not deemed themselves a perfectionist until they went through this and were like, whoa, I never really thought of it that way. And so I'm just going to start reading, if that's okay with you, and then you feel free to stop me at any time. I have like a little opener. The goal, I say, is that, you know, we want you to not just exist, we want you to thrive. That's what we're praying for during this time, that you're not just existing, but you're thriving. So I say, perfectionism. Here are a few things a perfectionist may deal with over the course of their journey. See if you can relate to any of these characteristics. A perfectionist is rarely content. They finally get a project perfect, then they will see all the ways that it could have been just a little bit better. A perfectionist sets unrealistic expectations for themselves and others. They are so caught up in the end project being perfect, they don't enjoy the process. A perfectionist will let failures get in their head and slow them down. They never start something because they're too busy trying to make it perfect before they begin. A perfectionist feels like they have never done enough, given enough, or loved enough. The feeling of guilt consumes them often. Stressed out, overwhelmed, and worn down define their lives most of the time. When a plan doesn't come together, they snap. Comparison torments a perfectionist. Their weaknesses stand out like a neon flashing sign. They are critical of themselves and others. Should I keep going on? I know this person far too well. For years, I've let perfectionism have control over my life. I'm finding freedom. I can't say that I'm perfect at keeping perfectionism from rearing its ugly head in my day, but that's a good thing, right? That means I'm giving myself grace and enjoying the process of growth in this area. Perfect will never happen, and I'm okay with that. Kind of. Do you deal with perfection? Do you deal with perfectionism? If so, write out the feelings that consume your life because you carry the heavy weight of perfect. If this is your first video that you're watching, I strongly encourage you to grab a notebook and a pen and journal these things out. If you've watched several of these videos, I know you already have that notebook. But I want to read a verse, so write this verse down, and then we're going to go back and we're going to talk on that a little bit. It's Ecclesiastes 11:4. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. I think that's so good. That's really goes in with what you were saying, how sometimes you don't start something. I have always been one that is not afraid to start something. I will start something. I will stop something to a default. I mean, like to a default. But what I have found to a fault.
So see, that's a perfect example right there. It's just what I see.
He'll always, man, the Lord was like, I'm going to line that up just right. He's like setting it up. But it's so true. Like, what was I even saying?
You will start
something. I will start something, and I'm okay with stopping something. But I found myself over the last probably several years, really, I almost have this paralysis by analysis, and I think it's because, it's funny, 10 years ago when I stepped into a new business, I had no previous success in that area or that arena. I just had an idea and a vision, and I kind of went after it, and I had nothing to compare it to or gauge it to or whatever. I just kind of was like, this is my vision. I'm going to go after it. I really don't care what anybody thinks. And I find it interesting after, we did that and we found some success, I kind of find myself over-analyzing and trying to filter it through everything we've done, or do you know what I'm saying?
You compare it to that.
I compare it to that.
Yeah.
And I compare it to either how I did it or how I didn't do it or what it looked like or how much time I put into it, or I gauge everything through that dynamic, or I majorly look at things that I messed up on, and to where usually I wouldn't let failure stand in my way. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I think, I'm probably not the only one who deals with that, but it's really interesting to see it in this form. Go ahead.
Before we started, I read that. I had never read that scripture before.
Really?
And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That's what I deal with.
It's so sad when you think about existing versus thriving. And really, it's not even existing. It's a miserable existence when you're constantly carrying a weight around.
I was listening to a podcast. It was a scientist talking to a doctor, so I know riveting stuff there. But they were talking about longevity of life, and they spent about 2 hours talking about the leading causes of death and how, things you could do to prevent that. And then, in the last hour, the doctor says, you know what? If I did all that perfectly, I could probably add about 5, maybe 10 years to my life. And he's like, if I did all that perfectly. He's like, but there's also, do I want to live long, or is it the health of my life that matters to me? And that was really profound to me, that like, you can add if you do everything perfect, you can add 5 or 10 years to your life, but will the health of your life
match that?
Or will you just be striving for that, to add that 5 or 10 years and be miserable?
Yeah, because basically, too, another thing that he was saying is that a lot of times people are like, oh, well, you can do all those things and you never know. You might step in,
Front of
a bus or something might happen to you. He's like, yeah, but like, what's the quality of your life? You can have the longevity, but like, what is the health quality within that longevity? And that's so true. It's so, so true. And so we want, what does that look like for us? And that's a lot of questions that I'm specifically asking myself in the season that I'm in. Like, two recent things that I want to tell you about. One as recent as last night. I told you we wear these little bands on our wrists that, and again, I'll post a link every time I say it to where you can read an article about it that I wrote. But it measures our data. We've been wearing it for a year and a half, and I literally look at my data every single day. Without fail, there's not a day that goes by that I don't look at my data. And I have been on this major streak of just like almost perfect sleep. I mean, like getting into the high 90s for an average on my sleep. And last night I went to bed, like around 9:20, a decent time, and I woke up at 12, and I was like super sick. I wake up and I'm like, oh my word, what is going on? And I was sick all last night and didn't probably fall back asleep until about 4:30 and slept just a little bit. And I hated that. I felt bad. Like, nobody likes being sick, nobody likes that. But I found myself so upset because I was like, oh, my sleep. I mean, I'm like stinking gonna be in poor quality, and I haven't had poor quality in forever. That's gonna mess up my average. Like, I literally was going through all of that, and I got to laughing because I was like, that's such a perfectionist. Like, what did we say yesterday? Embrace excellence. We do what we can with the tools and the resources that we have on hand for the current season. And the tools and resources I had on hand last night was me puking in a trash can all through the night. And so it's like, I mean, sleep just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and a good picture of that is like when you're, like how you can relate this to business is you need to watch your numbers. But like she was saying, oh, I had a bad day, or I had a bad night and it dipped. Now everything's ruined. But it's really the trend line that you want to watch. Am I continuing to grow? Am I continuing to get better? Am I continuing to increase? You're going to have the ups and downs along the way. But as long as the trend is good, then that's what you need to pay attention to.
What was the song in the 90s? I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Where did that come from? Lack of sleep? Okay.
Moving right along. Another thing that I'll just go ahead and air some dirty laundry. We've been cleaning out some storage units and cleaning out some clutter and going through some boxes. And I found some things. I might have said this the other day in a video, I'm not for sure. But I was going through some stuff, and I found all of these postcards, like a stack of postcards probably that high, from when we were on a trip. And
multiple trips.
It was multiple trips from vacations of postcards that I already had the names and the addresses to people in our business, and I was feeling the need to send all of these postcards, which was a great thing. It wasn't bad to do. But as I'm looking through these boxes, it was so therapeutic, and I'm going to really be talking on this later in the year about this topic. But I found myself, as I was clearing out the clutter, I was clearing out some emotional clutter as well, because my eyes could see the physical clutter of all of these postcards. I saw all of these notebooks of things where I did all these personality assessments on. I mean, I probably spent thousands of dollars on personality assessments on all these team members and all this stuff, and all these like marriage things I did, like all of these different things that I did. And the more stuff I pulled out, I honestly was
You're
like,
almost getting angry.
I was getting angry. I actually wasn't almost getting angry. I was getting angry with myself. And I was like, Monique, why could you not have just enjoyed life? Now, listen, that's going to sound bad like, oh, well, you were doing a good thing and you were helping others and you were investing in people and you were investing in marriages and you were showing people you cared. But honestly, it brought me to the moment to where in that period of time, no matter how much I did, I never felt like I was a good enough leader. I never felt like I was showing that I cared enough, loved enough, did enough, no matter what. And I make reference of that in this book. Eric Hudson, our financial manager and business manager at the time, he would say to me, Monique, because he would watch me play this out, and he was like, where does this come from? Like, why is it not enough? Like, why do you always have to do more and more and more, but that more and more and more is never enough? And it really made me start to really think on it. And I have to tell you, I knew that was always there even during that time, but really as I've had a little step back from everything and had a little period of kind of a break of just pushing hard with business, being able to look at that, it was a major eye opener, and I could see how unhealthy it was. I just was not enjoying.
Yeah, going back to the picture, you were trying to add that 5 or 10 years to the end, but like you were not, your quality was not.
Listen, in that particular business, I was at the top ranks. I was at the top income producing. I was at the top of all the things. You know, we had all the nice stuff, being able to do all the nice things. And I appreciate that, and it was all blessings. But I also carried the weight of feeling like I never, not that maybe I didn't deserve it, but that I always needed to be doing something else. And it was exhausting. Probably it was exhausting, and that was a good example of what you said. So I'm going to skip through some parts. I want you to think on times that you let perfectionism, or are there seasons that you are just like me, that it's just never enough. If it's with parenting, it doesn't matter. You can't, the perfect birthday party, the perfect vacation, the perfect, snacks
Instagram
on the table, the perfect Instagram. Holy crud, what a good thing to say. I'm telling you, I remember when Pinterest got big, the first year that I was like trying to do all the Christmas craft and make all the Christmas things and all this stuff, and I was like, this is dumb. Like, this is exhausting me, and like, it's too much. I had a friend one time, she was crying, talking about how when she was pregnant and she walked into the doctor's office, she felt like all of these moms were so happy and upbeat and whatever, and she just wasn't feeling that. And I'm like, man, we look at the world on social media and we can get so sucked in that is perfect. And let me tell you, do not be deceived. Like, it is not always perfect. You're seeing the highlight reel. Okay. So I want you to think through all of that. Where do you need to give yourself some grace? I'm skipping over some parts of this because I actually discussed it yesterday in Embracing Excellence video. Get to the root. So thanks for being transparent and sharing your thoughts and feelings, because I am assuming you probably press pause and you took tons of notes in your journal. So thanks for being transparent and sharing your thoughts and feelings during the last 10 days. When we start admitting we are struggling in areas, we can begin to fix them. Thank you for really digging in and investing in yourself. Speaking of digging in, let's cut to the chase and get to the root of the problem. If we want the fruit of perfectionism to quit showing and popping up in our life, then we need to get to the underlying cause and uproot it. I then go into the story that I told you with Eric, where he says, like, why is it? And for me, I was like, because I want to add value. I want to show people I care. I want to show people that I love. And he's like, then I thought, like, do I get my value from adding value? Like, where does this come from? And then I want you to write down the chapters in John 17 and 18. And I want you to take some time and I want you to read that today if you can. And I want you to see in this story how Jesus, during this period of time when I was majorly struggling with this, obviously I still struggle with it, I was able to realize that Jesus, he loved and cared so deeply, specifically like for his disciples and for everyone. But like when the period of time comes, his disciples did not stand by his side. They like ran, even denied him, you know? And it's like, and he was perfect. He was perfect, but yet he was still abandoned, rejected, denied, put to death. Like, he's given his life as a gift, and still to this day, people reject it. People reject him, and he was perfect. How can we expect to live a life as imperfect humans, dealing with imperfect humans, imperfect, dealing with imperfect, and think we're going to have some kind of perfect life scenario go down? It's just not how it's going to work. We are imperfect. Those around us have their own issues as well. And when it comes to the table, it really can be a recipe for disaster. But somehow we have in our mind that it's all going to be peachy keen all the time. And it's just not.
Yeah, I thought that was probably the best thing that I read in this chapter. Like, I thought that was really a good thing. And it popped into my mind that, like, you feel like it's never enough because it is never enough.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot.
I mean, he was perfect. He did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Not because of him, just because of humans.
Yes.
And so that's a great example that even if we were perfect, it still wouldn't be enough.
You know, there's a lot of sayings, and people want to always argue and debate it, like, you're enough, I'm enough. And then people are like, no, you're not enough. And it's like, I understand on both sides what people are saying. Obviously, you are enough in who you are made and how God made you, but you will never be enough. Like, you are never going to be whatever that perfect thing is in your mind that you think is enough. And I think that's just what we have to kind of keep in our minds, right?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times it's, for Jesus, it was more of an eternal impact.
Yes.
And if you have a purpose, and it's, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. They were like, wow, I can't believe after everything that's happened, we're still friends. And I was like, well, I mean, like, just because of that one thing, that doesn't define who we are. Like, I have a bigger purpose than that.
Yeah.
And so just because I didn't get it right or, do the exact right thing, it doesn't affect my purpose, I guess is
yeah.
what.
And I just want to hit on that for a second. This particular individual that was, saying this to you, I feel like at times throughout this person's life, he's been rejected and he's been denied, and he's shown great love to others. And I even felt, it's interesting that you brought that up, because when I was reading this, I actually thought of that situation, and I wanted to take a screenshot and send it to him, because I think we need to understand that as Christians, as we deal with people and their imperfections and their mess ups, like their blatant mess ups, when we reject them and we deny them, like, that's making some kind of impact. And when he mentioned that to you, I was like, gosh, like, he actually, I think that's the way he even thinks of Christians and Jesus. And I love that he saw that in you, that you had kind of stayed his friend. And so that's a lesson to learn. And it was a lesson that I took away, to be more mindful of when my humanness wants to come to the table and kind of push people away because of flaws. I mean, we all do it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like a self-protection mechanism, not to say that we don't need to have boundaries. You can always set boundaries. Please hear me out on that. But it's just something to be mindful of. So I want you to meditate on Ecclesiastes 11:4. And I also want you to look up and read, like I said, John 17 and 18. And can I just encourage you that if this is something that you are dealing with, and this is something that is a struggle for you, I'm praying for you, but I'm not perfect in this situation. And I pray that you can, that the Lord will just give you a peace and lift some of that weight off of your shoulders. Even as I was walking through it, I mean, I'm like, yes, like Monique, this is, for me, I could see to where I'm not thriving when I carry the weight of it.
Yeah, I think you talk a little bit in there about having grace for yourself.
Yes.
And sometimes it's easier to give other people grace than it is to give grace to yourself. So give yourself some grace.
One last story. How are we doing on time? Are we doing okay? Yep. I want to share this one last story, and it's about giving yourself some grace. And you probably, if you've read anything like psychology wise or like self-help stuff or like therapy type stuff, they'll tell you to go and like if you've got something that you can kind of link back to an issue from like when you were little, can you just go back and talk to that person and kind of let them off the hook? And I've done that kind of twice. It was actually Bob Goff recommended me reading a book a couple of years back. And in that book, one of the first questions was, do you remember the first time you felt shame? And I instantly, when I read that, knew the first moment where I felt shame. I was like 5 years old. We lived at a little country town in Alabama. My dad pastored a little church, and there was a graveyard out back. And in the graveyard, there was a ton of flowers on several graves, but then there was some graves with no flowers. And so my little 5-year-old brain was like, oh my goodness, these graves don't have flowers, and these graves have so many. So I just went and started taking flowers off of graves and going and putting them on the graves that didn't have any. And I was like a graveyard Robin Hood. And so stealing from the ones with tons of flowers and giving it to the ones with none. And an older woman from the church came out and got so upset with me. And not only did she get upset with me and get on to me, she pulled me up to the front of church because we were having a Sunday morning, Sunday night, and dinner on the grounds in between with the singing. And that evening service, she pulls me up and she tells the church what she caught me doing, and she made me apologize to everybody. And I remember I was so embarrassed. And that was the first moment that I felt shame. I really remember the feeling of shame. And so much so that I went to that little graveyard a couple years ago, and I was just like, oh, man, Monique, that was so sweet of you. Like, how sweet of you that you saw somebody that didn't have any flowers and you wanted to give them some. You didn't know that was taken from somebody. You were trying to help. And I think that helps a lot, like in giving yourself grace. And I've had to do that even just recently of, Monique, you weren't intending harm. You were really intending good. And it's okay. Like, talk to yourself. Another in that podcast, and I'm going to end it. Because
that's what I was going to say.
I know you're
this
getting
is what I was going to say.
Okay, you say it then.
Yeah, he was saying that he had sort of like, if he couldn't get something perfect, he would just like rage on himself, like internal anger, just like for the silliest things, like, oh, I didn't cook that steak to perfection, blah, 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 hair on fire. And he said he started doing this exercise where he would stop, he would pull out his phone, and he would record him, like he would imagine that somebody else, like his best friend was there with him, and what he would tell his best friend if he didn't get that perfect, and he would say it into his phone, and then he would send it to somebody. And he said, of course, if my I think he used like shooting a bow and arrow. He likes to shoot bows and arrows. And he said he would tell his friend, hey, you're just having a bad day. Like, it's windy. And,
the wind was blowing a little bit.
And he would be so kind to his friend if his friend was there in that moment, to where if it was himself, he would just be like, you're the worst, blah, 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 blah.
You're never going to get it right.
Yeah. And so once he started doing that,
he said it took him about
4 to 5 months, 3 to 4 months. He's like, I can't even hear that inner person anymore.
And he named him. I love that he named him. And I'm like, oh man, like I want to give that perfectionist part of me a name. Well, let's figure out a name for her. And he references that person like I never, I just don't see him hanging around anymore.
Yeah, can't even hear his voice. And he said he sort of imagined him as being in a boardroom, and he was sitting in like the CEO's seat, and nobody else could talk except for that person. And so now he's not even in the boardroom anymore. So I thought that was really good.
That's so good. Like, I'm a visual person, and that helps me so much. So whatever it is, if you're dealing with this, I feel you. And we're going to get through this. And we might not be perfect, and we may mess up along the way. But I hope this is always a reminder to you, and you can pull this chapter back out maybe a year from now, and you can see how much you've grown. I know I've grown in it. I have majorly grown in it, but I haven't perfected it. So anyway, all right. Anything else you want to say, or you want to do your whole spiel?
If you like this video, or you just didn't hate it, give us a big thumbs up. And it would really help us if you would subscribe to the channel and maybe share it with some friends. And last but not least, if you want to be in the know like me, when a new video hits. I was looking at my YouTube last night and there was no new videos.
He got so
and
mad.
I was
He was like, nobody's notifying me.
Come on.
Somebody needs to put a new video up here.
Yeah, so if you are like me and you need new videos, hit that notification bell, and when we post a new video, it'll notify you.
Yeah, right now we're just posting one video a day, which is excessive. It's a lot, but we're doing that with the 21 days. And I also want to say, with perfectionism, you know, we wanted everything to be perfect. We wanted to have an intro, and we wanted to have da-da-da-da-da, and thumbnails, and blah, 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 blah. But, like, we just wanted to start. Like, we realized we just want to start. And so we're glad that you're hanging around. We got lots of fun things in store. So really make sure that you subscribe and hit your notification. We've got all kinds of things with health and wellness. We're going to be diving into these bands.
Whoa.
Poke his eyeball out. We're going to talk about the bands. We're going to talk about our wellness journey. We're going to be talking about some travel. We got a big trip coming up, a 2-month trip, which we're super excited about. We're going to take you along for the journey. Okay. Tomorrow's video that we're going to share is all about creative problem solving. Every topic, I think, I love this topic. Some topics are a little harder than others, but tomorrow's is going to be fun. We're going to be creative problem solvers. So I hope you stick around and go do your homework. All right? See ya.